Hey guys, is this where the cool kids hang out?
In the past, I've made a guide about scouting, but one key part of that guide is that I don't actually explain what regions are and what the teams are in those regions, and the answer might surprise you. Find out next on YouTube. Now that we've got the old school YouTubing out of the way, actually some of these regions are interesting and don't include some of the countries you would have thought, like Australia's in a weird place. One region in particular is a huge imposter. You're obviously all about to find out about that. If you wanted to already know things like this, you can watch the stream. It's linked down below. The Twitch link in particular is the one that you want. While you're down there fiddling around, there's some cool podcasts. I'd recommend checking them out. Let's be honest, it's a pandemic. And what else do you have to do? In order to force us to assess all of these regions, we have created a tier maker. More specifically, IAL has created a beautiful tier maker that shows each of these regions. And there's also someone on Reddit who's created this beautiful layout of each of those regions. So let's get started. Which one's the best? Wait. There's some people that'll be watching this that have no idea what regions are. If you want to create a new assignment in scouting and you go down to region, this is how I scout usually, is hot prospect in region, or you set a higher scouted potential ability in a region. So region scouting is the most efficient way to cover the world without micromanaging you scout going to various different countries. When you're a huge club, you should be region scouting basically every region in the world for hot prospects, just so that's what wiring the world is. It's just so that you get funneled every good young player on the planet, because you have some Central Asian expert. Back to the action. Number 1 is Central Africa. Now, Central Africa sounds worse than it is. I avoided it for a long time, but there are a couple of nations that produce quality players here. You have Cameroon, which obviously is one of the traditional powerhouses of Africa. They've got the nickname the Indomitable Lions, which means I love them long time. You have Congo and DR Congo, which can both produce solid players. Now, obviously, Camavinga wasn't born there, but he's from DR Congo, or Republic of... Probably not good to mix those up. Republic of Congo. Central African Republic's national team is top 100. Gabon, Aubameyang. And for some ungodly reason, every Guinea team just becomes better, including Equatorial Guinea, over time in the game. So Central Africa is certainly given a short end of the stick here. I'm going to take Central Africa and put it one of 5 tiers. Elite, F and G, because he beat me in the streamer showdown. Then me, because I'm okay. Then we have Celtic, which is the below average section, which that's pretty self-explanatory right now. And then we have Bad Meat Pie is the worst section, because a bad meat pie is the worst. And Central African Republic, well, the country, I don't know. It might be the worst. It might be the best. The scouting region goes right into the middle. Rock solid scouting region. Tremendously underrated. Now to East Africa. East Africa has such powerhouses such as Tanzania, Kenya, Djibouti, Ethiopia. Yeah, it sucks. Look, East Africa sucks. I've signed one Tanzanian, one South Sudanese player, but none of these countries are going to produce the types of players that can be a star for your team unless your team is really bad. And if your team is really bad, you're not scouting Eastern Africa because your scouting range isn't big enough. Now, just because I've signed one player from Tanzania who actually was a starter for one season in my Twitch save, it goes in the Celtic tier and not all the way in the bad meat pie tier. And now it's time for North Africa. This is one of those that's not really a mystery. You've got like the same countries that you would expect. You have Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, Libya, and then they've also thrown Sudan in there because historically it's tied to Egypt, and the historian in me loves that. But Sudan and Libya, they just don't matter. So we're talking about Algeria, Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco as nations that can produce talented players, which they can. Not only can they produce these talented players, they produce them and sell them for cheap, like all African areas. Now, it's going to be a little bit more expensive in the wage department because North Africa has actual leagues that pay people actual money. No offense to the Sub-Sahara, but Neither of those are really true outside of South Africa. A few Eastern African countries, but it doesn't mean they're good. North Africa produces a lot of quality. It's accessible, usually even on an end of contract. And there, I'm throwing it up into the FNG tier for the best scouting region we've seen so far. Southern Africa, not just South Africa, even though it might just feel like that at times, but Southern Africa, containing other notable countries like Angola, which has made a World Cup, Madagascar, which is unusually good in Football Manager, Malawi, which is unusually bad in Football Manager, and former African Cup of Nations finalists, Zambia. They actually win. I feel like they might have won. They did. Zambia won the 2012 Africa Cup of Nations. Gets no respect in Football Manager, though, which makes Southern Africa a Celtic tier scouting region because there's just no area that's going to reliably produce good players. Angola, most of its good players on the national team come from being naturalized out of the Portuguese league, which means Angola itself is not great at producing talent. Zambia isn't for whatever reason. South Africa is a rock solid type of talent producing region, but very few stars coming out of South Africa, despite the fact that it's got a very solid, stable league that's in Football Manager and is fun to manage in if you have the time. And now to West Africa, a region that produces some of the world's finest footballers. You have Ivory Coast, Ghana, Senegal, Mali, Nigeria, Togo, Guinea-Bissau, for some reason, produces a lot of good players, but continuing, the Gambia, Guinea, Cape Verde, and Togo, all nations from which I have signed a player. There is one reason, though, that West Africa does not go into the top tier. We're taking it into the F&G tier. And we're doing that because if you don't have a decently large database loaded, your opportunities to land wonderkids from here are limited. There's no leagues in the game in West Africa. There's no giant big cash cow leagues in West Africa in real life. So there's no reason for the leagues to be in West Africa in the game. But when they're not in the game like that, you need to have a computer that can run at least a decent sized database. I haven't tested this out exactly, but I'd be comfortable with anything over maybe 50 or 60,000 people, or definitely something that says large database outside of what you already have loaded. Medium, small, probably not. You're only going to produce a couple of players from this region. So what are the odds they're going to be the players that you are looking for in your save? That's the only reason that West Africa is not a top tier scouting region, because the level of talent that area is able to produce is fantastic, but it's so reliant on areas that are very far from being leagues in the game. Like North Africa's got a pretty established league system. The leagues are rated as much stronger in the game, and so they're going to produce a more set amount of players. When you're talking about West Africa, they're essentially coming out of the woodwork, or ASEC mimosas. Those are your two options. Moving on to Asia and Central Asia, which you know I'm gonna love because it has such powerhouses as Uzbekistan and that's it. That's the only notable national team in any way, shape, or form that is in Central Asia, which means if you're scouting Central Asia, you might as well just scout Uzbekistan and save yourself the trouble, unless you think Borat's about to play a brilliant right wing. As much as I love Uzbekistan, Football Manager doesn't, making this the worst scouting region we've looked at so far. Not everybody can be Yasser Yalaladinov. Look him up. But okay, Central Asia sucks. How about East Asia? This is where we get China, Korea, both of them, technically speaking, Japan. You also get the Northern Marianas Islands, which I know you're excited about. Look, this is a rock solid region. You've got the best Asian nations are all over this region with South Korea and Japan, and China is capable of producing players, but they're going to be way too expensive. So I would essentially just discount that. But Korea and Japan alone should encourage you to scout East Asia, because those are teams that can produce world-class players, teams, nations that can produce world-class players, not in huge abundance, but we're in Asia now. Come on. Do I think it's better than Central Africa? No, I think this is right in here with one or two nations that have a shot to produce high quality players, which is more than can be said for East, Southern Africa, or Central Asia. So we're right in the middle. It's a me tier. Then to the Middle East, which is very complicated football wise. Shut up. Soccer wise. I'm saying football reflexively now and it's bothering me. Soccer. Because you have Bahrain, Iraq, Iran, Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Oman, Palestine, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Syria, UAE, and Yemen. A lot of these areas can produce pretty good players. Saudi Arabia can produce good players. Qatar can produce good players. They're the reigning Asian champions in real life. Facts. Israel, very capable of producing good players. Iran, fabulously capable of producing talented young players that you can sign for cheap. But that's the crux. Iran is the only place you can sign them for cheap. Israel's the next cheapest. In every other country, they're going to be nuts expensive. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, they're all crazy expensive. Iraq is not expensive because basically everything's already been leveled, but you aren't going to get a lot of good players out of Iraq. Humam Tariq is the thought of the past. I loved that guy though. But Iran in particular has a great youth rating, and the players that come out of there are so cheap, and I've sold them for so much money. I'm actually going to take the Middle East and stick it right on the me tier, because this is an area that if you have the opportunity, you should scout. You should scout Iran immediately if you have the opportunity. The rest of the area to see if you find that Humam Tariq somewhere, because you can get that person back. And then Israel has a good league system, plays in UEFA, and is somebody that can produce talented players. Politics aside. I've signed some Israelis, I've signed some Iranians. I'm bringing the world together. Let's just keep it going with the Asias. We've got South Asia next, which is Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. You already know the answer to this question, so let's just go ahead and go on to something else, shall we? I don't think Sunil Chetri's walking through that. Oh my God, it's Sunil Chetri. I have an autograph. Then Southeast Asia, which you would think is just very similar and gonna be terrible, but you're wrong. Thailand and Vietnam have very high game importance. Thailand won the Asian Cup in one of my simulations. Obviously, that was still an upset at that time. Indonesia is capable of producing quality players. They have a league in the game. Malaysia does too, though, and they're really not. So the biggest surprise and what you haven't thought about is that Australia is in Southeast Asia. Australia's good, and everybody knows that you can get one or two rock solid Australians every save. Look at the Australian national team right now in your save. There's a couple of players that you would love to have. Well, they're in Southeast Asia as a region. That combined with 2 or 3 other nations that are capable of producing players that could make your team and contribute to your team. And I'm really torn between putting this on the Celtic tier, a below average, and then putting this on the me tier of an average scouting region that a lot of people have criminally underestimated for a long time, myself included, to be perfectly honest. And I think it actually ends up on the me tier. And that even surprises me because Australia is one of the sneakiest ones. You assume it's in Oceania. It's in Southeast Asia, scouting region wise anyways. And that's all we care about. Speaking of Oceania, who's left? Well, it's New Zealand and a bunch of islands with 20,000 people on them, except for Papua New Guinea. I think there's a lot of people there, even though they're not quite sure how many, because some of those tribes still live in the jungle and they're like uncontacted. That's not the point, though. New Zealand is in Oceania, which is a reason that it's not the absolute bottom dwelling tier. You're only putting it there because you love New Zealand, because your name is Zealand. Put it in the bottom tier where you know it belongs. There's nothing wrong with supporting the country you're named after. Just lie to them and tell them it's in the Celtic tier. It's okay. Fine. It's in the bottom tier. Fine. Now to Europe, which everybody's excited for. Let me just get this out of the way. Central Europe is top tier because 5 of the best 6 leagues in the world and the vast majority of the top 10 best leagues in the world are all in Central Europe. Central Europe includes France, Germany, Italy, Liechtenstein, Netherlands, Portugal, Spain, Switzerland, Austria, Belgium. Central Europe, while it's expensive, is obviously an elite scouting tier. It's got everything going on in it. Also, South Europe, which is next, is a me tier because it has literally like 5 countries in it: Cyprus, Gibraltar, Greece, and Malta, and Turkey. Tell me that's kind of the same level we're looking at right here. South Europe is so weak. I just assumed that like Spain and Portugal and Italy were in that for the longest time, but they're just not. South Europe is actually just Southeast Europe. I don't know why. Then we have UK and Ireland, which goes straight into the F and G tier because the players are just stupid expensive. Obviously, the UK, in particular England, are able to produce really, really good players consistently. They're just so dang expensive that kind of what's the point of scouting it unless you have a team in that region and you just want to have the local knowledge, maybe pick up some homegrowns. It's something that I start scouting really late if I'm managing somewhere else in the world. Two regions that I don't do that for are Eastern Europe, which I'm throwing right into the elite tier. There are a ton of countries in Eastern Europe, and when there's a ton of European countries in one scouting region, the odds are it's a tremendous scouting region because you have Bosnia, Bulgaria, Croatia, Czech Republic, Hungary, you have Poland, Romania, Russia, Serbia, Slovakia, Slovenia, Ukraine. One of those is going to hit. All of those teams can make the World Cup pretty reliably. It's stacked. That is stacked. And they're also not that expensive outside of Russia. Sometimes Ukraine. Isn't that always the story? Russia, sometimes Ukraine. Ooh, edgy today, aren't we? Then the rest of the European area is taken by Scandinavia, which every country outside of the Faroe Islands that's in Scandinavia has made a major international tournament, sometimes more than once. Also Erling Haaland. Scandinavia is a second-tier scouting region because it's just outdone by numbers of countries with quality like Central and Eastern Europe. But you know what hasn't been outdone? The Caribbean. Just kidding. Great food, though. The Caribbean jerk chicken. So I grew up in Florida. I grew up right next to the Caribbean. Big fan of the culture. I wear the shirts. The teams themselves, though, Jamaica's pretty good, and its domestic league can actually produce a couple of quality players. But then you take every other one of these leagues and rub them together, you're going to get like 1, 2, or 3 players that come flying out of Haiti, or come flying out of Curacao or Barbados or Bermuda, or there's a lot of countries in this area, but the vast majority of them usually have one striker in League One or in League Two in England, and that's basically all they have. Which means, despite my affinity for the Reggae Boys and the fact that the Jamaican national team is actually going to be really good in the near future, the actual scouting of the region falls into bad meat pie. But how about Central America? This is a close one for me because you have Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Panama. Now, Honduras and Costa Rica are good scouting areas in Football Manager. El Salvador is solid and Panama is solid. I don't know why they did Panama so dirty. They lowered their game importance even though they just made their first World Cup. But these leagues are cheap to buy players from. The problem is there's not a lot of them and they won't reliably produce these good players. So we have to go somewhere that we haven't gone in a while because I don't think Central America is quite at the level of what we have on the me tier. It goes into the Celtic tier. Can give you literally one player you want to sign, and if they do, it's a pretty good deal. Likely won't. Now to North America, which Mexico, Canada, and the US. Huge issue here. The players are too expensive when you try and sign them, but two of these national teams are unfortunately fairly regular in the World Cup. Trinidad and Tobago. So this is going straight into the me tier. Also because I live here, and that just makes sense. Launching our tour into the final continent, which is South America, West and East. I'm going to surprise you guys here. They're both elite. Now, South America East has Brazil and Argentina. For obvious reasons, that plus Uruguay equals one of the best scouting regions in the world, probably just behind Central Europe for best overall quality of player. South America West goes into the elite tier for a different reason. Brazilians and Argentinians are expensive. They can run you up to 20 million. Brazilians can run you up to 30. Argentinians can be cheaper and get down to maybe 10 million, but the only cheap South American power factory that you have here is Uruguay, which is not the best cheap South American power factory. That would be Colombia, or maybe Peru, or Ecuador, or Bolivia, or Venezuela. Because if you want to make fun of any of those teams, what you shouldn't make fun of is the fact that all of them, with the exception, remarkably, of Bolivia — I didn't mention Chile, by the way, they're kind of important to this too — they're in South America West. They produce players that you can sign for sometimes even under $1 million that end up being pure world class. Pure world class. It is my personal favorite scouting region because I have built so many teams by signing $900,000 Colombian wonderkids, or snagging a Peruvian for $500,000. Nelsinho Maldonado from my BATE Borisov save became a world best 11 player, signed for $500,000 from Peru. That's just better than any wonderkid you're ever going to get out of Brazil in terms of value. You're obviously not going to see as many of those guys in this region as you would in Brazil and Argentina, but if you are a club trying to build up, there's simply no better region to scout in the world. I will not accept debates on this. It is top tier, leaving Central Europe, Eastern Europe, South America East, and South America West as your 4 top tier scouting regions. What's the best one? It's obviously Central Europe. It has 5 of the top 6 leagues in the world, and probably 8 of the top 10 leagues in the world are all in Central Europe. All of them. Netherlands, Belgium, on top of the other one, Austria, Switzerland, whichever ones you want. Only Russia and Turkey are probably better leagues outside of it. See, look at me, not being a homer for the MLS. It was that easy. I'll see you on another video, or a stream, or hopefully both.